Hey everyone, welcome to the React course. I'm super excited to have you. In this lecture, we are going to finally start doing some React. And before that, we are going to set up a basic development setup so that we can develop our React apps quite easily. And we are going to look into all the tools we are having available to us and also write a very simple app. First up, I want to clarify that the purpose of this lecture is not supposed to teach you React. We'll do that in coming lectures. In this one, I want you to get familiar with the commands that are going to be executed or the steps that happen while a React app is running and the tools we are going to use and so on and so forth. So first of all, let's just take a look at what tool we are going to use and yeah, let's get started. Okay, so the tool we are going to use is called Create React App. Now, this is nothing but just a shell script, so to say, or just a setup script to be precise. And what this does is this gives you a basic React development toolkit, if so to say. If you're coming from somewhere in Android or iOS development or any sort of development, you must be familiar with tools that are used in development. So consider this as a tool that sets up that development environment for you. It downloads all the libraries for you. It gets you the basic tools that you need to do React development. It gives you the basic all the basic libraries that you need and so on and so forth. So this tool is really great for getting started with React, and you can do all that by yourself as well, but that is a really tedious process, and in my opinion that should be avoided until and unless you have a requirement for that particular thing specifically, or you have some done React for 2-3 years and now you are experienced enough to know what you are exactly doing. So in that scenario, I'll recommend you to go ahead and try that. But in all other scenarios, if you don't have a strict need for that, don't do that and just use Create React App, because that will save you time and effort, and also the chances of something going wrong with Create a React App are really low, and the chances of something not working and not syncing up with the other things is relatively higher when you are doing it by yourself. And we're gonna look in detail what this does in just a second. So what this does is it gives us a React team. It's developed by React team and helps us getting a basic setup up and running really fast. So how do you use that? Now we have some prerequisites to this, and what those are you should have Node and npm installed. And once you do Node installation, you have a npm installation already available. Now, let's just open up our terminal and see which version of Node and npm we do have. So to check which version of Node you have, write node hyphen hyphen and version. And mine is version 10.15.1, and anything that is currently in Node stable LTS release will work fine. Just remember that if you have a version that is not current LTS and it's lower, updating Node will be really crucial because you won't encounter unexpected bugs that way. On the same note, let's just check this for npm as well. Okay, so I am currently at 6.4.1. Now there is another tool that comes with npm called npx, and this tool comes with npm from version 5.2. So if you are having anything lower than version 5.2, I'll suggest that you upgrade it to. Now if you want to set up the basic setup, then let me just go to, and I'm in my folder, and what I'll do is I'll write npx. And just know that npx is similar to npm, but Create React App is just a script, and installing that as a tool is not something that we want to do, because we just want to use Create React App once and then we just don't need it. And by once I mean once per project, because it's just setting up other things for us and not actually doing anything else. So what we do is we write npx create React app, and then you write the name of your app. So say my first app. When you press enter, it'll go online and do a lot of things, download a lot of libraries and so on and so forth, and that will take some time. And once it's done, it's going to print out some messages telling you how to use it and for what. Now I'm not going to do it right now because internet issues and it might not work, so I've already done that and I'll show you what happens after that. So if I go to practice app, this is what you will get once you have completed that process. It will create a folder of whatever name you gave it. So I gave it the name practice app, and so all these things were constructed by that script. Now we are going to look into each of these in greater details, but just know that create react app lets you do this. Coming back to this, why do we actually need a build step? And that is what I'm going to talk to you about next. So let me just open this up in my VS Code so that we can close this, and from now we are gonna live in our VS Code and do all the development there. So I'll just go back and close this, and in my VS Code I've opened up that folder called practice app, and what I want to do with you now is I want to look at each of these files created, and I'm gonna explain all the important files that we need for right now, and after that we are going to look into how to run our app and how to test it and how to debug it and so on and so forth. Now let me repeat myself once again that the purpose of this lecture is not to teach you React. In this lecture I want you to be comfortable with the idea of using these tools and understanding why these tools are needed, that we are going to talk about tools we are going to talk about coming forth. Now one more thing is, if I write something that you don't understand, or if I haven't explained that bit as yet, then don't worry, because I am not teaching you React. I am just making you comfortable with the tool, running such commands that give you a certain results and understanding what goes behind those commands. If that sounds nice, then without wasting any time, let's just dive deep in. So the first question that I want to ask is, why do we actually need create react app? And before that, I want you to do a mental exercise with you. Let's just look back and see what is our playground actually is. So the code we are going to write is going to run into the browser, and this section I want to call who knows what. And the idea of who knows what is knowing where we are writing certain parts in a certain language and where are they running and in what form. So getting back to the browser, let's think and make a mental model of the browser. Now a browser has three things: something that understands HTML, something that understands CSS, and something that understands JavaScript. Now at its core, this is all a browser has: something that understands HTML called an HTML parser/render, something that understands CSS called a CSS parser, and something that's called understands JavaScript called the JavaScript engine. And HTML engine and CSS engine are also something similar. Now there is also a presentation layer that gives you well formatted text, and there are so many different things to it, but in our part, that's all we want to think of. So getting back to that idea, a browser is nothing but just an interpreter. Say if you have programmed in Python, then the Python interpreter is similar to the browser, but the browser can interpret three things: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now we are writing React, and React is also a form of JavaScript, and we are going to use the React library that we are going to soon see is available to us once we created that app, and the create react app goes ahead and downloads it for us. So we are going to use React, but the important question is, does React and the library behind React work in the browser? Does the things that React provide to us, like declarative state management and component-based UIs, work in browser directly? And the answer is actually no, because what we are doing is are abstracting out details that we aren't actually doing ourselves. So one good reason that we need create React app is there is something called a build step to React. And what that basically means is once you are writing your app in React, you're abstracting out details that are not written in native JavaScript. So what happens is React empowers you with that abstraction to make your life easier as a developer encountering different parts of problem, and React gives you solutions that make those problems a little easier if you're tackling them. Now that is fine and that is really good, and that improves performance of the developer and also helps the developer do rapid development and so on and so forth. But that doesn't mean that the browser can understand whatever your abstraction is now. So we have something called a build step in between. Now what a build step is, it's just an input output machine. And what do I mean by that is a build step takes your current app in a state where React understands it. Now the build step understands React and its abstractions. What we're gonna do is we're gonna feed our React app to the build step, and the build step is gonna output native JavaScript code to us. And what do I mean by native JavaScript code is it's going to take all the things that we have written plus all the library code. It's going to take it, it's going to logically make it into something that the browser can understand, and then it's going to output that. Now I'm going to show you an example quite recently that I've made, and it's not something that is important to understand, but I just want you to see that once we are inside the browser, you might not see that there is React, or you might not find tags that we are going to write, or components that we might see in the React app might not be available into the browser side, because they are passed through something called a build step, and the build step converts the React part into HTML, CSS and JavaScript bits. So there is something sitting in between, and that something is provided to us by create React app, and we don't actually need create React app for it. Those are called build parsers, and those are tools that are available to JavaScript ecosystem, and you can set them up on your own as well. But that is a tedious process, and that might be intimidating to new folks that are just coming to JavaScript and React specifically, and you want to actually learn React and not learn about all those nitty and gritty bits of setting up and better. It's like knowing that you have a compiler and your compiler will work. You don't need to know how your compiler works or what your compiler is. Just letting that on create React app gives you that ability to learn React more efficiently without worrying about things in the internals and things like the build parser is not working or my build tool is not working and so on and so forth. So with that in mind, now let's also find an abstraction in ourselves that we are gonna use those tools as commands, and we are gonna have two main development cycles. One is while we are developing that app, and once we want to build that app and put it in production. Now what happens in build is it takes our app in its current state and passes every single thing to native JavaScript. Once we are done with that, now future changes made to the app need to be rebuilt. In development, it's not actually true. What happens in development is it makes a copy in such a way that changes made can be reflected directly without doing a build again. Just remembering that is fine. You don't need to know how it's done. You don't need to know what is going inside the internals. Just knowing that in development the changes you're going to make will get reflected as soon as you save the thing or as soon as you develop it again. What will happen in the build phase is if you build it once, then it freezes your current state and gives you a build. Now if you're making new changes, you have to build it again. Okay, now I say let's understand the folder structure a little. So in my VS Code, here you can see all the folders that are given to me. Now let's first look at this node module folder. This is nothing but a location where all the libraries live. So think of this as just the library folder of your app, and inside this all the libraries that we have are available. Now for developing React apps and for this particular course, we are never going to look, or we are not never going to go inside this folder and change anything. And in 99% cases of you developing anything with Node and JavaScript and React, you'll never look inside this, because these are just libraries that we are going to take for granted. Our development will mostly happen in the source folder and sometimes in this public folder, but not always. And for that reason, I'm just going to look into this public folder first. Now there are three main files. The first is that is familiar to us, and I'm going to open that one first. It's called index.html, and this is just simple HTML5. Up top there is this talk type declaration that tells it that this is HTML5, the same old HTML tag, and inside that headers we have our same old meta. Now this is nothing but this is just having to import that favicon, and you already know what favicons are, that thing that appears near the title. Then we have a meta for the viewport, and you know this is for cross browser support. It will maintain that ability to not having to zoom, or it will make it responsive across multiple devices and multiple screen sizes. So this is the meta tag for that. Then the meta for theme color, and you can ignore this one for now. Then we are importing our manifest. Now this is something that is used for, and it also has a comment to tell us that something called progressive web apps, or PWAs. Now progressive web apps are implementation of React that is to make a website in such a manner that it acts and behaves like a native app. Now there are some really good tricks that you can do with PWA, and for that, if you want to, if that topic excites you, you should take a PWA course, and that will give you sufficient knowledge to encounter any challenges that you are having. Say if you want to make an app but you don't have experience with Android or iOS, then PWAs can empower you to do that. So let's just ignore this for a while. Now we'll jump to the title that is quite familiar to us, and I'll change this right away. So I'm gonna call that practice app. Okay. Now in the body there is this no script, and this no script tag, if you don't know, is, so what it does is, if the browser has disabled JavaScript, or if this is running on some older browser that has no JavaScript, then this message will be displayed. So if there is no JavaScript in the browser, or the JavaScript has been disabled, then we get this, whatever inside this is loaded. So what this says is that you need to enable JavaScript to run this app, and then we just have a div with id root, and that's all there is inside this. Now I know that in the introduction lecture, while talking about React and how it doesn't let you, it helps you abstract that DOM manipulation and everything, I might have left some loopholes, but that time I didn't have anything to show you actually what happens and actually what is going inside. So today I'm going to fill all those voids that you have about how React is different from, say, something like a jQuery. And so that's something that we are going to discuss a lot, and you need to keep this in mind. The only thing that you need to keep in mind is this one right here. Inside our HTML we just have a single div with id root and nothing else. Now this is the manifest.json, that is something related to PWA, and I'm going to ignore this for a while. Then we have our favicon, which is nothing but just the icon, and that's all inside the public folder. Now, without going into the sources folder, I just want you to know and see how this app actually looks. So, and yeah, one more thing. If you want to see what commands are available to you, what you can do is you can go to package.json and look in for something called a scripts. Now, these are the commands available to you. So there is a start command, there is a build command, there is a test command, and there is a eject command. Let's talk about the start and build commands and how to use those. So let me close this one, and if I come here and if I want to run my app in development phase, what I need to do is I need to go to npm and say start. Now using this command, it will start a server in this directory and serve this React app to me, and it's doing its thing right now. And once it's done doing its thing, it will print a message and it'll tell us where to look for this app on our local host. So it's still going and it will finish in a bit. Okay, by the time it's running, let me just open up the source folder, and it's almost done. So it says it's starting the local development server, and it's slower in the first time because it's doing a lot of things. After the first time, it will cache most of these things, and then you won't have this bad an experience because it's taking too much time right now, but it won't take that much time once it started once. So the good thing it does is it already opened up the browser for me, and whatever URL this app is going to be served at, it's going to pop up in my browser automatically. But if that doesn't happen to you, what you can do is you can just wait for this to log the information where it is running, and then it'll tell you what exact location can you look up for this app to. So let's just wait for this to start, because actually it's taking really long for the first trial. And so let's just talk about the other thing that's called build, and it's done. So it tells me that it compiled my app successfully and it's running on localhost colon 3000. If you go hover over that and you press control and right click or left click on this, it will directly open up in the browser. Now it also gives me information that this is development mode and most of the things are not optimized, and this is just for developing the app. In production mode, you should do npm run build to have a build that is optimized to deployment, but we are just doing the development right now, so we don't care about that, and we'll just go and see what is in the browser. So if you can see, I've highlighted localhost colon 3000. That is the address my app is running at, and this is the default app that React gives me. Now I want you to think something with me right now. If you remember, we saw that index.html file, and inside that index.html file there was nothing but just a div tag with the root. What React does is it has an element, and let me just show you with example. So the first file that I'm interested in is this index.js file, and this is the file that is attached in our HTML. So if you go down and see that we have a reference to this file, yeah, let me just open up index.js here. So what I'm doing, we are importing React, and then we are importing something called React DOM, and these are coming from two different libraries. React comes from React library and React DOM comes from React DOM library. Then we are importing a CSS file called index.css, and we are going to look at the syntax of importing CSS and how can we import CSS and everything else. Then what we are doing is, in our CSS, what we are doing is React DOM.render is a function, and what this function does is it takes a root element in the HTML and this binds our React app to that element. Now what React will do is everything that goes inside that root element will be controlled by React. All the layouts and all the logics and all the manipulations are going to be taken care of by React, and you don't need to do anything inside the HTML. Not like you can't, you can actually, but what React does is it binds to a given root element on the web page that you are serving, and now everything that you want to do is going to be done by React. Now I want to take my time and focus on these two lines. Now these two lines are responsible for the same thing that I previously talked, called PWAs, and ignoring these throughout this course is going to be something that we are going to do, because we are not going to dive deep into progressive web apps, and the reference to these things is something that you are only going to see in this file, and later we will opt not to use this because we are not creating a progressive web app. So just ignore these for now. Now the interesting bit is what's something called an app, and it's coming from a file called app. Now there is no extension, which means that this is either a JavaScript or JSON file, because if you are not using an extension to a file, it can either be a JavaScript file or a JSON file, and these imports in JavaScript are smart enough to understand those and directly have those to us. Now looking to in the folder, we find this file called app.js, and if I open this one, now I see my first introduction to something, a syntax that looks like the React syntax. Now what I'm doing essentially here is, or what React app has given me essentially here is, that they've given me a dummy app which gives me a understanding of what my React app might look like. So this is what is on the display, and let's see how it was created. Now I know you don't understand most of this code, but this code is not supposed to be understood, and later what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through each things, and we are going to just change them, or either remove something or add something new. And let me clarify that again, we are not supposed to do this and understand this on our own right now. We are going to learn about all these things in detail, and then we are going to apply those things in more detail. Right now all we want to do is just know that this file is actually making the UI that is available to us right now. So we are importing something from React package again, and we have this CSS file imported from something called app.css, and we have a SVG file imported as a logo. Now I want to get your attention to this image tag. Now this is something that we have seen from our times in HTML, and what it does, it takes a source, and that is supposed to be an image path, and then it tells me what it is in the L tag, and it shows that. So in the web page, this is that bit, this is that SVG file. Now we have a paragraph, and this is the text inside that paragraph, and sure, I can see that as well. This is the paragraph, and this is the text inside the paragraph. Then I have a hyperlink, sure I do, and this is the text on there. Yes, this is, let's say, is learn React. Good. Now this is the header, and this is the familiar div. I want to take your attention back to something called a render, which basically, if I don't know anything and if I'm reading this code for the first time, if I'm going through this code, render sounds like something that is related to UI, and sure it is. All the UI elements that are supposed to be displayed on the screen goes inside this render thing. Now inside this render, I'm returning something that's really big. So these brackets or parentheses right here are nothing, but it lets me use multiple lines inside the render. It's similar to having a variable and storing all this as string inside that variable and then returning that variable. But using this parentheses, what you can do is you can write that in this format itself. So whatever is inside from this parenthesis to down here is all going to be returned. Now This might look like HTML, and some parts of it do look like HTML and they are named similar to HTML, but they are not actually HTML. What this whole thing is, and each element of it is something called JSX. And in the next lecture, we are going to look into what JSX is actually. So, forgetting that for a while, now let's just make some changes and see what we can change. The first things I want to change is I want to change this anchor tag, and I don't want it to say learn HTML, or actually I don't want this any at all, so I'm just going to remove this completely. Then what I'm going to do is I don't want this image as well, and I'm also going to clean up this project structure a little, because from the next lecture we are going to start with actually the core bits, so we don't need this logo as of now. I'm going to remove that. Then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go and delete this file from this folder. Okay, now it says the file isn't there anymore. I know if I just save this, it'll recompile the whole thing, and now it doesn't complain because I'm not using that anymore. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to just take a look at the CSS file inside the app, and these are just basic CSS elements. Now this is something that was related to the logo, so I'm going to remove that. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to come back to these over again in a longer period of time, and we are going to look at all the elements. I'm just removing the bits that were responsible to do things with the logo and everything. If you want to read this is just HTML, and you can actually read it on your own. You don't need any guidance from me or anything. Now let's just go back to the app.js file and edit this as well. So in the paragraph, I don't want to say this. I want to say this: welcome to your first React app. Okay, and as soon as I made those changes and saved it, it already reloaded the browser for me, and I didn't have to do that on my own. So this is something called a hot reloading, and what it does is basically whenever you save a file, it will go ahead and see what changes are made and reload your browser automatically for you. You don't have to reload your browser over and over again. This is something that is available in the development mode, and this is also a tool that helps you develop React apps powerfully. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to squeeze your brain, and I'm going to excite you with something. I'm going to write some really powerful new thing that you might not understand, and I'm just doing this for the sole purpose to show you how powerful and what is great about React. So let me just do something. I'm going to create a variable called card, and I'm going to write a function to this, and what I'm going to do is in this I'm going to say return, and just directly returning something, and this is something that we just saw from the previously. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say paragraph, and this will return a paragraph. This is a card. Then what I can do is I can close the paragraph, and this is complete. Now this is a function that is returning something, and this something in this whole bit I already told you is JSX. Now what I can do is, and this might look like really strange to you, but stick with me for a while. I just reformat the paragraph, and what I'll do is I'll go ahead and do something like this. Now this looks super strange if you're seeing this for the first time. I've created a function that returns some piece of JSX, and I am using that as a tag. How is that possible? I mean, HTML doesn't allow you to create custom tags, or does it? It actually does it. It's something that is called a component, and this particular thing right here is a functional component. Now your browser won't understand what this card thing and this means, but the browser doesn't see this. All the browser will see is HTML, and Going back to that idea of having that notion of a build step is coming back to us here, where we are gonna pass this to a build step and it's gonna convert that into a form that we want to see actually. So if I just go back to my browser, I'll see, oh, this is a card and it's already printed. But let me show you what it looks like to the browser. And I am in my developer tools, and if I go to this and if I press this, you can clearly see inside the header there is a class called app header. Okay, then there is this HTML that we wrote as paragraph. Then there is this paragraph, but we didn't write this paragraph here. We wrote this card thing. And this is actually the power of React that I talked to you about in the introduction, called component based reusable. Think of this as a complicated bit of HTML CSS that you want to use over and over again, with maybe a different data elements but a similar structure. And let me code that similar structure with you right now. So I'm gonna have a heading on this one. I'm gonna start with the h3, and I'm gonna say this is my heading. Now I'm just filling data bits, but I'm gonna show you methods so that you can fill those dynamically. This is a paragraph, and let's just ignore that for a while, and let's just also use some dynamicity. So I'm gonna say props here, and ignore if you don't understand, and let me just do that for a while. So props dot say what I want is age. So, and age seems like a weird thing to say, so I'll go ahead and say message, and I'm gonna save this, and it shows me an error because I did something wrong. And what I did wrong was, okay, so I can't actually have multiple things lined up on top of each other, and the only thing I can return is a single root, and I'm going to talk to you about that also in coming lectures. So I'm going to wrap the whole thing inside a div, and it doesn't complain anymore, and it compiles successfully. How do I know that? Because if I save this bit now, it doesn't complete. Now what I can do is I can do an even better thing. I can have something called message here, and I can pass values to it. So say I want to say hi for the first one, then I want to say maybe say hello, and then after this I'm gonna say bye. If I save this and if I go back to my screen, what I see is, let me just go back and zoom into this. What I see is a div, and these things are available to me as HTML. This is something was a recurring bit, and I wanted to use this in my app. If using traditional HTML, I had to use this thing, copy this here, change it here, then copy the same thing again and just change this bit, and copy this thing again and change this bit. That is a UI element that is reusable to us. If we have UI elements that are reusable to us, we construct them in a form called a component, and then we can change bits of components by using something called props and states, and we are going to talk more about those in coming lectures. Now my purpose of showing you this is just showing you how powerful React is and what I meant by components. Now let me also tell you something. I also mentioned something called indirect DOM manipulation. So what do I mean by that is, if you remember, I'm not actually doing any kind of get element by ID or anything like that. I'm not interacting with the DOM myself. I am just writing a syntax that I am saying or I am giving to React in a declarative manner. And what do I mean in a declarative manner is, I'm just saying, give me that, I want this chunk of UI to look like this, and I want you to have I want you to display these things, three things for me in this order and with these parameters or these arguments or these variables. And React does that for me on its own, and I don't need to have any logic for this, or I don't need to have any kind of DOM. I don't need to get the nodes myself. All I'm doing is inside this JS file, when I'm actually having this React DOM render, I'm getting the root and I'm binding my app to that root. Now all the DOM changes that are gonna happen over time or initially also are abstracted away by React, and React does that for you. You don't need to do all the DOM manipulations yourself. So I think that this will make it whatever loops or whatever holes you had from prior. Now this is really powerful, right? And we can also dive into the CSS bit if we want to and look at what is going on here, but let's just ignore that for a while, and we are going to learn those things in greater details. Now one file that I've been skipping and I've been planning not to talk about till now is this app.test.js file, and this is nothing but just a testing file that we use for testing of our app. Currently we are not having any tests, or we haven't written any tests or anything like that, so we are not going to use this file for now. But if for curiosity sakes we just want to look into this, it's just a simple caching technique, and in this development cycle we are not going to look at testing that much, so I'm just going to ignore this. If you even want to delete this, then you sure can, and that will not harm your app in any manner. But if you don't want to and just want to keep it here, it's okay to keep it here. Now most of our development will happen inside this on app, its folder, source folder only, and we are going to structure this in coming lectures more and more depending on what we are building and what purpose that serves. This is just a simple git ignore file. The package lock.json is a file that is used to lock our packages in a state that we want them to be. The problem of versioning, if you know, say some breaking changes happen between React 16 and React 17, then we don't want our app to break because it was designed on React 16 and everybody updated to React 17. Package.lock.json, what is that during the time of development, when you first downloaded that library, it locks the version of whatever development version you are using right now, and it will use that same version all across your app till the point you don't go ahead and update it on your own. So let me just show you that. Let me also just show you the proof that this will also speed up the development build process once it's done once. I'm going to use Ctrl C to close this. I'm going to go back and I'm going to do npm start again, and this time you will see that it will start really fast. So last time it took like 5-7 minutes, and this time it's up in like seconds, less than a minute. So this is our setup that we are going to use for React development, and I'm super excited to have you with me. And in the coming lectures I'm going to start talking about all these things that I have abstracted away in this lecture, and in the next coming lecture I'm going to start talking about JSX, and then we are going to build on top of that, and soon we'll have enough knowledge to start developing our apps. And yeah, we'll start with our project from scratch then. Hope you liked the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching.